So, right, Sam and Martin on searching for Mesolithic in Ceredigion. I will let you take it away then. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Thanks for inviting us. And my goodness, what an introduction. Okay, so we're here to talk about the Portalis project and the work that we're doing in Ceredigion on the Mesolithic. So this Portalis project is a transdisciplinary Ireland Wales project. It's a pilot and it's 18 months. So we started in April last year. We've got until the end of September this year. It's EU funded, led by the South East Technological University in Ireland. And it's supported by us, by the University of Wales, Trinity St David, and also some other partners, including Amgueddfa, Ceredigion Museum, and various stakeholders around in the county of Ceredigion. So the Irish side of the project is focused on South East Ireland, with, particularly this area here around the Waterford estuary and Dunmore East. And the Welsh side mainly concentrates on Ceredigion within the central part of Cardigan Bay. So what is the Portalis project? It's a cultural tourism project. So we're focused on developing cultural, natural and heritage tourism in 6 coastal communities. So the project Portalis has set out to work with these 6 coastal communities and visitors in Cardigan Bay and Waterford. And it's been designed to increase tourism, particularly in the wake of COVID. So it's been designed to increase the footfall of visitors in these particular identified 6 coastal communities. And what we're doing is we are doing this through looking at the natural and cultural landscapes and trying to look at parallels between ancient and new journeys in the context of climate change. So where does archaeology come into this project? Basically, the design of the project has actually used the idea of a first, i.e. a Mesolithic journey between Ireland and Wales to give it an historical focus to what will be new Ireland Wales connections and networks, which we're hoping to generate through the project. So the project has also hoped to use archaeology to show ways in which Mesolithic people manage changing environments. So like I say, we want to look at parallels between ancient and new journeys, but we want to look at those in the context of climate change. So we're hoping to, the project is hoping to look at the opportunities and different resources that were created through changes to the coastline during the Mesolithic. And we're looking for potentially, I think the project initially set out to look for contemporary parallels. So as I say, we are using 6 particular coastal communities that have been identified to base the cultural tourism network within. And those 6 coastal communities, as I say, have been identified in South East Ireland and in West Wales. So in West Wales, the 3 coastal communities are Tannaboch, Aberystwyth and the Erin Valley and Llangrannog. And as I say, this project was designed to establish at least one cross-border tourism network between these places. And this will represent and be sustained by key stakeholders from these communities. So this network is going to be one of the project legacies, which is working to develop visitor amenities and encourage a flow of visitors through these coastal areas and through these coastal communities. So we're going to talk about the Welsh side of the project. So we're focusing on Cardigan Bay. So specifically, what are we doing and what have we got planned for 2023 in Cardigan Bay. So lots of public outreach and community activities. We've had volunteer excavations at Towson, at Llanllir in Towson, last year in 2022, in May 2022. And Jack actually participated in this. We've got another 5 weeks of excavation this year in 23. While we ran the excavation, we were running it for students and for volunteers, and we also took school and group visits to visit the excavation. And we are doing talks and workshops as new discoveries are made. We're doing talks tonight. We've been doing them throughout the autumn and winter. We are running guided walks, which will and have explored the archaeological landscapes and material culture, the finds. We will be doing foraging walks and looking at things like the resources that would have been available to Mesolithic people. Then we have citizen science and archaeology events. We'll be running field walking, show and identify artifacts workshops, because one of the things that we're finding is that lots of people in the community actually have flint collections, which sometimes they haven't really known what to do with, and it's really nice to try and bring all of this together to Ceredigion as a whole. And so, yeah, as I say, we're looking to do quite a bit of outreach to record those flints as well that have never been reported. And then we also have the Festival of Archaeology, which is coming up in July. So we'll be doing some events, probably some foraging walks we'll be running during that period. And we want to put on a storytelling event as well. We've got various ideas and plans for the Festival of Archaeology. Another thing that we have, which is in progress at the moment, is a piece of software called HuMap, which will be self-guided archaeology trails and works as a virtual museum on not an app as such, but a piece of software. And then we will have an exhibition at Amgueddfa Ceredigion Museum. This is opening on the 29th of April and running until the beginning of June, isn't it, I think? And then part of that exhibition, there will be some virtual fantasy reality pods. I say fantasy because it's not necessarily based on some of the archaeological evidence. It's more of a design-led creation in response to some of the archaeology. So it's design of visualizations of Mesolithic worlds, but you can put on a headset, you can handle some of the 3D representations of artifacts that we found on excavation. And this is going to be running alongside the exhibition at Ceredigion. And they're also, the pods will also be taken out to the communities as well. So we've got a lot, we've been doing a lot, and we've got a lot coming up this year as well. So apart from public archaeology and outreach, we've also been doing an artifact collections review. So we've been looking at existing collections from Ceredigion, and these are currently held in Ceredigion Museum, the National Museum of Wales, the National Trust, cantre'r, and at Dyfed Archaeological Trust. So we've been re-examining some of the collections, particularly the assemblage from Tannaborg, which is our largest. And we've also been doing survey on land, sea, and the intertidal zone. And as a result of this survey as well, we've been identifying we've been identifying environmental change from the sedimentary record in Cardigan Bay. So going back to the exhibition, this, as I say, is opening in April 2023, and we will be showcasing Mesolithic and Neolithic artifacts from Ceredigion, and we're also going to be exploring the connections that we have with South East Ireland, and as I say, we've got the immersive virtual fantasy reality experience. So that's what we're doing. That's what we have been doing, and that's what we will be doing. But also this project is about what we know already and what we're finding, and how we amalgamate that into a new narrative for Mesolithic Ceredigion. So both in Ireland and Wales, both sides of this project are actually, apart from the new work that we're doing and the new re-examination of artifacts, we are also using research from projects that were carried out over the last 20 to 40 years, sorry. And in Ireland, this has been focused on the Ballylock or BLAP project, as well as Noel McDonough's private fieldwalking collection. But in Wales, we're using Martin Bates's work, including that which was undertaken for the Lost Frontiers Dogland project. And this is giving us a picture of changing Mesolithic coastlines. So you can see from these images that we've got a really detailed changing coastline from 11,000 BP right through to the start of the Neolithic, or what's generally thought to be the start of the Neolithic, around 6,000 years BP. So from this research, what else are we able to say? We know that Cardigan Bay had significant landscape change since the last ice age, where it transformed from a lowland upland landscape to an upland landscape. We also know that humans returned to Wales around 14,000 years ago at the end of this last ice age. Now in Cardigan Bay, we have typologically early Mesolithic material at Tannabolch. That's probably the main site that we have dates from. We don't have radiocarbon dates from any sites, but the material there suggests that people returned to Cardigan Bay around 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. Other than that, Mesolithic signatures are generally quite sparse in Cardigan Bay, and they're mainly surface finds. Neolithic signatures also are fairly sparse, and there's very few sites with pottery. The earliest pottery that we find in Ceredigion may be from around 6,000 years ago. So going back to this last slide here, and that pottery was found at Llandussel, and that's the earliest Neolithic pottery that we have in Ceredigion. So along with the artifact review that I was talking about, where we've been looking at collections in various museums, we've also been trawling Archwilio and Covline, etc., so that we can map as much as possible other recorded finds which haven't necessarily amounted to a collection such as those that we find from Tannabolch. But and some of these pieces also are quite difficult to track down to a holding location, and they're mostly single finds or spot finds, but the distribution of these does suggest coast and river valley movement during the Mesolithic. So what have we got in Ceredigion Mesolithic in terms of Mesolithic artifacts? From excavation, like I say, the largest site that we have is at Tannabolch, which was a large site with thousands of flint and stone artifacts. And this site was excavated in the 1920s. This collection is held at both between Ceredigion and the National Museum of Wales. Then we have Llanach, which is the National Trust property down in the Aran Valley, and this holds a medium-sized scatter of around 50 to 70 artifacts from excavation in the 2000s. And then we have our own excavation in 2019 and 2022, which was done by students and volunteers at Lampeter. And this collection is another medium-sized scatter of around 50 to 70 artifacts. So those are the 3 sites that have been excavated. Other than that, we have Mesolithic artifacts from field walking, which have been, these are the ones that we know that have been reported. We have Abamaga, which has a small scatter of less than 10 artifacts. The Clwyd area actually is very interesting. We've got records of what could possibly be quite a large scatter during the 1920s. This was collected. Unfortunately, this is now lost, or we're trying to track this down. And Plasgogerthen, we also have a medium-sized scatter of around 50 to 70 artifacts. Some of these are possibly Neolithic, but around in the Clwyd area, it's quite interesting. We want to look around this area a little bit more. And yes, and also, so as I say, we also have lots of unreported artifacts from field walking, and we know people in the community have collections. So this is part of our outreach work. We do want to do some of these, show and identify people's own collections, so that we can bring this into some of the reported records of Mesolithic Ceredigion. And as I say, in terms of Neolithic material, Neolithic sites and finds in Ceredigion, the material is similarly sparse. Again, from what we have got, I mean, what we're seeing again is mainly coastal and valley, river and river valley locations in terms of the distribution. There might be a little bit more upland distribution around here, but it's pretty similar to the Mesolithic. So we've got so this is just a breakdown of what we've looked at on the records of Neolithic material. And when I say material, I mean most of this is again flint. We've got potentially, we have monuments, so monuments including those for burial, so chambered cairns and kists, possible long barrows, possible stone circles. Again, quite a lot of this is through 19th century records, but there's not necessarily anything left on the ground. We've got records of single finds of ground and polished axes. These are, yeah, mostly single and surface finds. And then we do have some pottery, as I said before, very little pottery in Ceredigion. Most of it is from, well, the earliest is from Llandyssil, so that's down in the south of Ceredigion. There was plain and decorated bowl from this site, so yeah, like I say, this is the earliest. And then so down in the south, but then moving up to the north, there's only one other area, which is Penryncoch and Llanellar. Both had impressed ware from the Middle Neolithic, and also Llandyssil had some later. So Llandyssil had early Neolithic and Middle Neolithic pottery. Penryncoch has Middle Neolithic, and then Llanellar also has later grooved ware. And there's some very small scale evidence of cereal around the Penryncoch area. So this is some of the pottery from the pits at Penryncoch. This is impressed ware, and burnt material associated with the pottery has been dated to around 5,500 years ago. This was similar to some of the pottery at Llanellar and at Llandyssil. And then, so this is a sherd. Oh, sorry. This is a sherd of the impressed ware from Llanellar, and some grooved ware from Llanellar as well. And we know from other places in Britain and Ireland that this type of pottery was in use slightly later. And as I say, this is the only places in Ceredigion we know with Neolithic pottery. So yeah, so I've taken you through what we're doing, what we have done in terms of public outreach and events for the future, what we will be doing, what we're doing in terms of amalgamating our knowledge and creating more knowledge. And one of the main parts of Portalis for us on the Welsh side of the project has been our excavations. So I'm going to let Martin go into a bit more detail about those with you.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everybody, and thank you for bearing with us in our times of trial before the talk started. So I'm going to run through now some of the field work we've been doing on the project, and just to say that you know, that for me, a lot of the work that we're doing here is a culmination of work that I've been undertaking on a sort of intermittent temporary basis for at least the last 15 or so years, particularly around the site of the submerged forest at Borth. So here you can see our sites with Borth here in the north, the site at Tannabuch that Sam has been referring to just south of Aberystwyth. For those who know the area, Tannabuch lies at the foot of Pendinas with the, of course, the Iron Age hill fort on the top. And we've been working in the valley bottom there. We've been working at Llanrysted on the foreshore there, where there are peats. We were hoping to work in Aberaeron, but what we were looking for, and we know is there, is currently buried beneath the beach, so we're not going to get much chance of that. And then our site down here at Llanllir, near Talsarn in the Aeron Valley. Here's Lampeter, Aberaeron, and we're working halfway between the two. Just want to pick up on a couple of points that Sam made to do with the sparsity of Mesolithic archaeology in this part of the world. Of course, if you go to Pembrokeshire, it's everywhere. And one of the questions that we're trying to address through looking at the collections, looking at people's fieldwalking assemblages, is this a real pattern of rich assemblages in Pembrokeshire and poor assemblages in Ceredigion, or have we just not found the Ceredigion record? And I think there probably is a good record of the Mesolithic in Ceredigion. It just hasn't been found because there haven't been so many collectors working in the area. Farming practices in Ceredigion are very different to those in Pembrokeshire. We don't see lots of ploughed fields in Ceredigion because more of the dairy cattle, dairying industry. So, you know, these are some of the issues we're trying to struggle with. So rapidly going through some of our sites. This is the main area of our excavation at Talsarn. So here in the two circles, you can see that the areas where we've been working in the last couple of seasons. Now, the site at Llanllir is just north of where we're working. At the top of the screen is the site of a Cistercian nunnery and a medieval manor house, both of which have long since disappeared beneath the ground. But we're working just to the south of it. And you can see here our trenches in 2019. So we excavated in 2019. And then, of course, we had COVID. And we were only able to go back in 2022. And in 2022, we excavated trenches in this area over to the left here in this circle, as well as further trenches around our trenches from 2019. I mean, what you can see with the eye of faith here is a sort of difference in the vegetation cover here, and you can see a rougher sort of cover of vegetation around it, and this sort of smoother green in here. When you actually get on the ground, what these are very low mounds. They're just slightly above the rest of the area. These fields are very flat. And these are low mounds, and Dyfed Archaeological Trust had looked at these a few years ago and thought they were prehistoric burnt mounds. In other words, piles of burnt stones, usually of maybe late Neolithic Bronze Age date. And that's what we thought we were excavating when we went there. It rapidly became very apparent that these weren't burnt mounds. There were no burnt stones at all. and in fact they were quite natural mounds. And what they are, this is a reconstruction here. Our site is down here in the bottom of this blue area here, and what this blue area denotes is an old glacial lake. 20,000 years ago, as the ice was melting back into the Cambrian mountains, the whole of the Aran Valley floor around Wellenbach and Tal San was a large lake, at least 100 meters deep. And our sites are the very last infillings of this lake. And we think that there's a series of small, low, topographic highs surrounded by wetland in this area in the early Holocene, that are the remnants of this glacial lake. So here are our trenches from the 2 seasons together. You can see we've dug 11 trenches altogether. These T1, T2, and T3 are transects into the wetlands. So this is our one area here around this cluster of trenches, which is our one island, a second island over here, and we're into the wetland, and we undertook coring in the wetland to recover paleoenvironmental samples that'll give us the landscape context of this activity on this island. In terms of the vegetation history of Ceredigion, it's well known for the upland area around Tregaron. Of course, Tregaron Bog is a very well-known and famous site. It was one of the earliest pollen records in the UK, dating back to the 1930s when Harry Godwin was professor in Cambridge, and it's been a sort of yardstick of environmental change. But this is for the uplands. We have very little good information on what the vegetation change through the Mesolithic and the Neolithic was in lowland Ceredigion, and that's one of the things that we're trying to address here. So there's our trenches again with the air photograph map. Here are some of the trenches under excavation. This is trench 1 under excavation in 2019. You can see that this is they're very shallow. The surface that the ranging poles are lying on here is the surface of this island, and we're coming down to the edge of the island, and you can see as we come towards the bottom of the picture how things are getting darker brown where the organic peat is preserved as we go into the wetland, which is behind the photographer's back. So we're very shallow sequences here. When we first came here and we discovered no burnt mound, of course sort of spirits dropped. We thought we were just digging natural geology for a lot of the students, and in order to sort of keep morale up, I promised a bottle of wine for the first person to find a flint, and the first flint duly came up in the first couple of days. Whereupon the next question was, well, what's the next prize? And the next prize was 2 bottles of wine for a polished stone axe, and that came up about 3 days later. And you can see on this right-hand side here, just beneath the point of the ranging pole, you can see that partially polished stone axe peeking out from the sediments there. And it was quite clear by the end of 2019. Here's another one of our trenches, trench 4, that we had a site here on these islands with a very low density scatter of flints. I think we had something like the order of 15 flints and this partly polished stone axe from the first year. Certainly enough to encourage us back. The polished stone axe, usually a sort of Neolithic indicator. The rest of the finds were rather undiagnostic flint flakes. But of course, being West Wales, the only way you can get flints into this site is by people carrying them here, because the river gravels all coming out of the Cambrian mountains don't contain flint. The nearest source of flint is the beach, where there is a low concentration of flint, probably brought down by the ice from Northern Ireland, and that's the source of the raw materials for these people. So any flint that we find on these sites has been carried in by humans. An interesting little feature here, and one we didn't make a lot of at the time, you can see this black spread of material here cutting down into the underlying deposits here. It's here, it's this little feature 6012. At the time, I thought this was probably modern contaminants, but these sort of ephemeral pits are just what you find in the Mesolithic. So we need to go back and re-examine this, because this could be the sort of place where we might, we'd certainly get a radiocarbon date from here. And so far, we haven't been able to date any of the artifacts, but dating a pit like that to what we would think of as probably the late Mesolithic would be really exciting. So that's one of the tasks for this year. And here's another one of our trenches, and you can see as you're coming off into the wetland how much peatier it is. And that's interesting because, of course, peat preserves pollen, and if we want an environmental record for the area, that's where we go to find it. Here's one of our trenches from this year. What you're looking at here is trench 10. This is a plan of a 14-meter long trench, and this is a section through it, and each one of these dots is one of the flint artifacts. And you can see there are some sort of clusters through here. There's a general spread, but there's certainly a cluster here. And if you look at them in sections, so here's the ground surface, this is the topsoil, this is the subsoil, you can see how all of these flints are coming out pretty much on the same surface here. So these things don't look like they've moved around very much, and they're pretty sharp. So it looks like, the people have made them here and left them here. I think those three up there in the top of the topsoil, I think somebody's made a mistake in their surveying and put a decimal point in the wrong place. So here we are. Here's our partially polished flint axe. That last trench plan I was showing you was this one, and Jack actually found in sieving this artifact here last spring, and this is a microlith. This is typical of the late Mesolithic. So it appears maybe that this trench here, it contains evidence for the site is a sort of transitional, it's got elements of Mesolithic, it's got elements of Neolithic, and we're going back. This is what we're going to re-explore again this summer. So there's our artifact numbers by trenches. You can see very significantly more artifacts in trenches 8 and 10. And what we find when we look at the distribution of the artifacts, most of the artifacts are coming from this end of the island. There's none from that end of the island, and from this end of that island, and none from that end of the island. So there really are spatial differences in the distribution of artifacts here. What they're doing, we don't know at the present time. Bone isn't preserved here. We've got no evidence of hearths. Maybe we've got this pit. I think these people are coming maybe to waterfowl, to fish on these islands. At the moment, no evidence anybody's living there. But again, we hope to find more evidence of that this summer. The edge of this old lake comes through here somewhere. So this summer, we're also going to put some trenches along what would have been the dry land along the edge of the lake, in the hope that we might pick up some evidence of more substantial human activity on the dry ground. They say we've been coring. Here's our coring machine out, taking cores. You can see meter-long core through here. So this, you can see at the background here, this is our island, and you can see how the vegetation is much different on the island. It's just about 50 centimeters higher than the surrounding wetland, with all this sort of reedy stuff through here. This is one of our transects through the islands here on the left-hand side of this picture, and you can see we've got about 3.5 meters of peat and clay silts. We've got some radiocarbon dates down there at the bottom of 10,880 BP. So we're back well into the early Holocene. So this is a Mesolithic age peat here. At the moment, we're not sure what the top of the peat is, but I would guess we're certainly somewhere perhaps in the Neolithic here, and we're undertaking detailed pollen investigations to look at what the environment was doing over time. So we're hoping that we're going to get a link between the archaeology on the island and the vegetation change through here. So that work should be completed by early summer. moving quickly on, because I think time is probably passing, move to here, to Llanrusted, a site which is on the coast at the present time. And here's the coast. Here's our trench through these peaty deposits, and you can just about see the peaty deposits here. Interestingly, on top of them is this structure. You can just about make out a stone structure here. This is a stone causeway or trackway or something across the top of the peats. No idea what age this is, but presuming it's medieval or post-medieval. And here you can see it just there, those stone, those ordered beach pebbles on the top there. That's part of that trackway coming through, and it's sitting on top of this sequence of organic material, and they look very similar to the peats we find at Borth. And we've dug a trench through it. We're currently working on the pollen diagrams from this trench. Here's the simplified stratigraphy there. It's not very deep, it's only less than a metre deep. Here are some of our radiocarbon dates, and you can see that just beneath the peat here, we've got dates of about 1800 BC. So we're into the, that's the very early Bronze Age. But the whole sequence goes up to the early medieval period at the top. We had expected this to be older, and probably the bits down here probably are older, but what it's telling us is that these peats that we find at Borth and at other places along the coastline certainly aren't all the same age, and they're documenting different time periods. Here's our pollen diagram from this particular site. It's quite interesting because you can see the way you read a pollen diagram is each one of these columns is a different species. So you can see pine, pinus, betula, beech, ulmus, alder. And basically the thickness of the graph in that direction is a percentage. So here you can see alder. Down at the bottom here, nearly 80% of all pollen is alder. You get to this point and it starts to decline through here. And at the same time, things like poaceae, which are the grasses, are starting to increase here. And this is happening around about the end of the early Bronze Age through here. So we're seeing in Llanrusted a change from an older carr wetland to a dry, open grassland environment. And interestingly here, this column here, Sporomyella, which is just down here, this is fungal spores from fungi that grow in cattle dung, and it's just about at the time that there's a transition, or just before the transition to more open grassland. So could this be our earliest evidence for cattle farming in Ceredigion in the Bronze Age? We'll have to wait and see. We've worked at Borth. Here is the submerged forest for those of you familiar with Borth. Anybody who hasn't seen it, next time there's a big storm, go down to Borth, have a look at it at low tide. It's absolutely stunning. We've been doing some work there. The Mesolithic horizons, what you're looking at here, the top of the peat here is probably late Neolithic. The bottom of the peat, which is about a metre beneath the beach here, is late Mesolithic. But if you want to find the early Mesolithic, you have to, well, we'd have to dig a hole 25 metres down through the beach here to get to the bottom of it. So obviously we can't do that, but we've been drilling down to the bottom. Here's our drilling machine in Borth in October, November. And we were able to, each one of these is a borehole. I'm not going to bore you with the details of what they mean, but basically this is minus 20 meters beneath the ground surface. We've got dates of around 9,000 here. So what this tells us is that the sea had flooded into the Dyfi estuary by 9,600 years before present at the latest, and we're going to get some more dates from down here. So we'll get an indication of when the sea flooded into the Dyfi and how that changed the environment for the Mesolithic people. As I say, we've also been working at Tanabulch, and here's our drill rig, different one this time, working away just behind the beach at Tanabulch. For any of you who know it, the Iron Age hill fort, of course, is on the top of the hill here, and this is the Ystwyth River is running behind that chap's head there, and along that line there. And it looks very much like what the Dovey would look like if they reclaimed a lot of the land around there with drainage. We drilled down through the sediments. Here you can see some of the peaty deposits on the foreshore here, and this is what they look like in our cores, and you can see how peaty brown horizons are alternating with grey, more silty horizons, and the gravel at the bottom. This is the gravel of the late Ice Age river as the ice melted back into the Welsh uplands. These are the gravels that were laid down. And again, we've got, these are the boreholes, much shallower here. It's only 6 meters deep before you hit the gravels at the bottom. And we've got dates going back to 6,390 BP, which is the end of the Mesolithic through here. So we think at some point in the later Mesolithic, but we're not quite sure when yet, the sea first flooded into the Ystwyth around the bottom of Pendinas. And that's important because, of course, Sam was talking about our Mesolithic site at Tanabwch, which for any of you who know that part of the world, if you come across the bridge onto the Tanabwch beach and the car park, just before you cross the bridge on the left-hand side is the old isolation hospital, and on the right-hand side is a pillbox. And this is the site of this Mesolithic site. So for us, it's really important to know when the Ystwyth first flooded, because it's quite likely that the early Mesolithic occupation of the site and the late Mesolithic occupation of the site, the river was very different. It was probably a freshwater river in the early Mesolithic, but by the time the latest Mesolithic occupation of the site took place, it had probably transformed into a coastal landscape, pretty much like that of the present day. Interestingly, that site has not been dug since the 1930s, but I think there's indications that bits of it are left, and I'm hoping with the correct permissions that we might be able to go and excavate a bit of that site later on this summer and actually see what's left of it and collect some of our own samples from the site. So it's certainly a site that's crying out for reinvestigation. So that brings me to pretty much to the end here. As I say, Sam has run you through those things. The events that are coming up, if you want to participate in any of those, if you go onto the Portalis website, hopefully very shortly, there will be links to walks into the submerged forest in Borth on those dates, links to our excavation. We're looking for volunteers for the first couple of weeks of the excavations and every Friday through the rest of the excavations for those 5 weeks. All of those will be bookable via Eventbrite. There's no cost to coming on any of these, but we simply want people to book onto them so that we can manage numbers and send out information and so forth. The exhibition happening there, and some more events in the Festival of Archaeology. So thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr, and I hope you all got something out of that, and any questions, we'll try and do our best. Thank you.